I'll be going over the final reflection for the Latin American course. So, the first question asks how, at the end of this course, uh, you are able to demonstrate an understanding of complexities of identity, including how deeply rooted identity is in culture, language, religion, race, ethnicity, geography, or relationship to power in Latin America. So I can demonstrate this by my Latin American map that professors requested us to make for one of our final projects. Basically, by drawing this map out, I'm able to identify all the countries and areas of Latin America and their major cities, as well as identify some areas where there was heavy indigenous people influence, um, and that is how I can demonstrate culture, religion, background, ethnicities of Latin America, and on top of that, geography as well. So, what are the main takeaways from this course in terms of some crucial, in your opinion, similarities, differences between countries in Latin America that help you understand specificities and intricacies of that region? The main takeaways are that although not every indigenous tribe is the same, they all have their different way of eating or what they eat or what they believed or they were all similar in the fact that they just wanted to live in peace with their tribe and to be one with their God, and that they wanted to work things through with the Europeans, but unfortunately the Europeans didn't see the same eye to eye. So there's the similarities are that each region had its own indigenous peoples that were living and thriving. Differences would be that they all were different in some way or some form, or how they did some systems differently than others. So it's like, for instance, the Incas. Well, they were the tribe that climbed Machu Picchu and had their community living on top of the mountains. And then you had the Aztecs, which lived in a body around a body of water, essentially, which is present day Mexico today. But they had or present day Mexico City, but the Aztecs had a waterway system that they had instilled in their community, rightfully so. So the differences and similarities of those tribes would be that they were both indigenous peoples, you know, trying to live as purely as they thought they could, as they knew, as good as they knew how to, and then the differences would be that they spoke different languages, they had different tongue, had different native tongue, but they were of the same continent, same country. With what you have learned in this course, what is your analysis of the term Latin America? How do you unpack the term? Make sure to include specific references to the readings and topics as you analyze this term. Latin America is Latin America is a buildup of a bunch of cultures in relation to Latin speaking languages. In the ways that and Broken Spears, you kind of get the background and the story of the Mexican Aztec Empire. Um, they were living and had been living their way, minding their business in a way. And, here comes the Spanish Europeans to take over their country, and by that happening, you get this huge explosion of a new culture where you have a little bit of mixed indigenous and European, but now you're getting more major European Spanish influence onto the country. So now you're not such an indigenous country anymore. You're now heading towards a Latin country, Latin background, um, creating a movement of a Spanish culture in these countries. And then you have Portugal too. Portugal coming in to take over in Brazil and have their influence as well. So Latin America is a region which has a lot of heavy Spanish culture, Italian culture, Portuguese culture, all this Latin culture from these different countries now being implemented in this new America, creating a Latin America. How your participation in this course and course assignments help you communicate effectively in oral or written about form about topics beyond or transcendent of the borders of the United States or about the United States in its comparative and interpretive framework. So, by me participating in this class, I have a stronger background knowledge of the history and culture of Latin America and how it's had its effect on the world. And by learning these concepts, I am able to write and communicate assignments in a way that makes me sound familiar to the subject. Not that I know everything, but that I can communicate these ideas effectively by using the correct terms to call someone a mestizo or Amerindian, and so knowing these concepts in this class helps me further explain other topics of migrating Latin culture into the United States or its border and so forth. How does the content and knowledge you gained in this course relate to other courses that you have taken? Um, so, for this course, I have learned a lot in the relation of humanities. So, this course and actually my humanities course go well together because we are talking about the human rights essentially of humans and what happened in the times when Latin America was discovered by the Europeans. That has to do with a lot of human rights and how we had viewed human rights back then, and going over freedom, freedom of speech, to say what you want to say, and and that the Latin, the indigenous peoples of Latin America, they were subject to genocide, and knowing that they didn't deserve that they had human rights as well. Um, that ties into my humanities class because in my humanities class we discuss, what what we should accept and what we should not accept as a society for peoples, and how everybody should have rights, and what social cues and cultures are out there. So humanities in Latin America course go really well together. I found that. Um, Describe the process through which you went to create your final project. So to create my final project, the process I went through is basically doing some research on the country Nicaragua and um, its war on drugs and uh, political political corruption, and basically just doing detailed research to find what the causes are of these issues in Nicaragua and to see what some solutions may be. And then, as well as creating a map, a detailed map of Latin America for everybody to see in my class. And that is my process. The last question says, were there any pertained connections made in this class, or that you became aware of between coursework and your personal life? Uh, Personally, I have some connections to this class with my personal and this. I think that connections that I made is seeing how similar but different, everybody kind of is, especially when you're looking at Latino culture here in America. You kind of get a feel for how everybody treats everybody, and like looking how everybody's a little bit different. Like you have maybe mestizos here in the states, and they are maybe treated a little bit differently than those Latinos who represent a little bit lighter skin color. So it's interesting to see how they all treat each other, but they're all different. Um, and also knowing that each culture has a different way of doing certain traditions, and like Mexicans don't make the same tamales as Venezuelans, and or Argentinians, and Argentina people eat more meat in empanadas than, I don't know, Peru. Or so I've been able to kind of see the differences between others, but also their similarities and how they do relate. So, but that is the end of that.